Hello everybody, welcome back to Think Outside the Board, or if it's your first time here, welcome. I'm your host Brian Toohey. This is the Kickstarter update for the first half of June, which means it's going to be covering the period of June 1st through June 15th, and games that I'm recommending that will complete their funding during that period. Now, I'll do a first section on those games. I've got 10 of those games today. Then I'll do a quick little section on games that I've personally backed or pledged from the previous video, so you can see what I actually personally decided to back from that group from the last video. Then I will do a quick little section on the games that I have acquired into my collection since the last video. And then finally, I will finish off the video talking about the games that I've played, and I'll go into a little more detail with those games. And then finally, I wanted to make a little channel announcement, which I think I'll do right here instead of at the end of the video. And that is that I will be out of town this coming week for a couple days. It's from Tuesday through Thursday, which is going to kind of interrupt everything that I do on my YouTube channel and my website, which means that you won't see any more videos from me until this coming weekend. So I'm recording this video on Monday. It will probably get posted Monday night or Tuesday in the morning. And then I have a few more videos kind of in the pipeline coming up. I'm doing a first impressions video on CloudAge, Curious Cargo, Merv, and Kanban EV. And then that will kind of catch me up on any lingering 2020 games I wanted to do first impressions videos for. But none of those videos will start hitting until the weekend, until I'm back in town and able to edit and finish filming. So all those videos will probably premiere from next weekend through the weekend after. And then at the end of next week, probably around Thursday or Friday, you'll get a second Kickstarter update for June. And that video will cover the period of June 16th through June 30th and games completing their funding during that period. So that video will land very end of the week next week. And then somewhere around there, you'll also get my Game of the Month video for May. From all the games that I've been playing in May, what my favorite game was, my favorite later edition, if someone's done a reprint or a second or third or fourth edition, and then also my favorite game that I've played that's not a recent game. So that's from at least 6 months previous to me filming the video. So all those things will be coming this coming weekend through next coming weekend, but there will be a pause in videos for a few days this week while I am out of town. If you're someone who's always looking at my website for the daily Kickstarter updates, I probably will not get those up on Wednesday or Thursday, and then Friday I probably will have all 3 of the posts up from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So just a little announcement, there's going to be a little delay in some of the work production because of that little trip that we're going on with our new puppy so that he can go to some dog beaches in San Diego, and we can probably get some takeout food from a couple restaurants that we like in San Diego and then eat them either in a park or in our hotel room, because we're still not messing with maskless dining for the most part, unless it's outdoor and it's not very crowded. Anyway, let's move forward and get to the content of this video, starting with the first game of the 10 that I'm going to be talking about today that will complete their funding during the first couple weeks of June. So the first of those games is going to be the Castle Panic Deluxe Collection, and that's going to fund on June 3rd, and it will tentatively deliver in May 2022. Now, their minimum funding that they were asking for on this game is $60,000. They're currently sitting at $334,000, which is 5.5 times their initial asking price. Now, Castle Panic is a light game for 1 to 6 players. I would put the risk on this campaign, on this Kickstarter campaign, however, on high. And the reason for that is that the publisher, this is the first Kickstarter they've ever done. So they've made some other games. They've done fairly well in their sort of Panic line. They have several games in the Castle Panic line, and then some kind of spin-off games, some reskinning games. And they've done very well with those, but that is most of what this publisher has done, and they've never done a Kickstarter before. So, you know, we assume that they're going to do well. You know, they have some money. They have fairly deep pockets, I think. But it's a first-time thing, and you know, you don't really know Kickstarter until you've done it. Now, when I'm talking about Kickstarters that have games that previously existed, I figure why not mention the Board Game Geek ratings of those. So The Castle Panic score on Board Game Geek has a 6.7. The 3 expansions that have already been released, they have ratings of 7.2, 7.3, and 7.5. Just so you know that. I think anything in a 7 is fairly solid. The publisher here is Fireside Games, and they have previously published Castle Panic, a game called Hot Shots, and Star Trek Panic, which is a retheming of Castle Panic. The designer on this game is Justin DeWitt, and I believe Fireside Games is more or less his company. He has designed those same games I just mentioned that Fireside Games has published. In general, when I do these, I try to list the top 3 games that someone has made, and if they have more games inside the Board Game Geek Top 1000, I tend to list all those games. For most designers and artists and publishers, there's only a few games. I try to at least list 3 games, so when you're hearing these names, if you hear a game that you know, that may give you some insight into whether this is going to be a game for you or not. So that's the reason I do this. Now, there are 7 different artists on this because this Castle Panic Deluxe collection collects 5 different games. So the artists here are Davey Cow, who has previously done Sea of Legends, Justin Chan, who has previously done Century Golem Edition, The Walking Dead Something to Fear, and Video Game High School. Also, Anthony Cornoyer, who's worked on Crisis, City of Gears, and Rattle Battle Grab the Loot. Gregory Krasnoperov, and this is his first big published game. Chad Hoverter, who's worked on Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Mice and Mystics, and Spectre Ops. And Matt Paquette, who's done a lot of design, but is also now working as an artist, and the biggest game that he has worked on as an artist is Mariposas. And then finally Ted Lambert, and this is also his first big published game. Now, in this Kickstarter, you're going to be able to get the limited deluxe editions of 5 Castle Panic games all rolled into one. So that's going to be the original Castle Panic, the previous 3 expansions, which include the Wizard's Tower, the Dark Titan, and Engines of War, and then a new expansion that's being made for this Kickstarter called Crowns and Quests. So Castle Panic essentially is a light tower defense game. So players are going to be working together. They're going to have this series of sort of 6 towers in the middle of the board, and then enemies are going to be coming in from all around, and the players need to defend this kind of ongoing horde of enemies from getting to the middle of the board and destroying all of the towers in the 6 different sections. It's sort of like a pie slice, like you might have seen back in the day in Trivial Pursuit. So the board is divided up into these 6 pie slices, and the enemies are coming in, assaulting the central area from the outside, and then your job cooperatively is to protect that area and kill all the enemy. So let's talk price points on this. So for $60, you can get Castle Panic, the Wood Edition, which means you're not getting any of the nice plastic pieces. You're not getting the deluxe plastic stuff. Also for $60, you can get Castle Panic Deluxe plastic only. Now, there's no game with that pledge level. So essentially what that is if you own Castle Panic already, and you own the kind of wooden version of the game that's previously been available, you can just pledge that pledge level, get kind of all the plastic upgrades, and then you'll have the deluxe version. For $90, you can just get Castle Panic Deluxe. So that would be the version with the plastic. So if you want all the nice stuff, and you don't own Castle Panic, you want to at least get that pledge level, that $90 one, because the very first one, the $60 one, the Wood Edition, won't include the deluxe nice stuff. If all you want is the wooden version, you can buy it here for that first pledge, that $60 version. However, I wouldn't recommend getting that through this Kickstarter because you can probably get it many other places at a discount. But if you want the new version, the nice plastic version, you should get that here, and that's the $90 pledge for Castle Panic Deluxe. Now, if you're looking to add on the expansions, the nice Kickstarter versions of all those other expansions, we're getting to those. So the next one is the $200 pledge level. It's quite a jump up. And that will include Castle Panic Deluxe, plus the deluxe version of Wizard's Tower, and a playmat. Also for $200, you can get the Castle Panic Wood Collection. So that is going to be all 5 games in their non-Kickstarter version. And that would be $200 if you want to do that. And then finally, for $350, if you've got the money, is the Castle Panic Deluxe Collection. And that's going to include all 5 games, so the base game of Castle Panic, all 3 previous expansions, the new Crowns and Quests expansion, and all of that stuff in the deluxe version with the nice plastic stuff, plus a playmat. So $350. Again, this will fund on June 3rd, and it will tentatively ship in May 2022. From there, next up is Chai Tea for Two. Now, this will fund on June 4th. It's got a tentative delivery date of February 2022. The minimum required funding for this one was $20,000. They're currently sitting at $146,000, which is 7 times their minimum requested funding. Chai Tea for Two is a medium-heavy game for 1 to 2 players, which is a little different from the original Chai, which was on Kickstarter a couple years ago. They did Chai, and then they did an expansion for it called High Tea. And those games were light games for 2 to 4 players. They were kind of set collection games. This is a smaller game. It's designed for 1 to 2 players, so it can be played solo or it can be played with 2 players. And it is a heavier game. It is a more complex game. It's also a dice worker placement game. So you're going to be doing worker placement actions, but using dice workers. So those previous Chai games are on Board Game Geek because they have been out for a while, and they are currently sitting at ratings of a 7.1 for the base game and 7.4 for High Tea. So those are fairly solid scores. Now, this game, like the other ones, is being produced by Steep Games, and as I said in the past, they have produced Chai. That's really the only thing they've done. That's kind of where they started their business with this game, and they've done really well right from the start. So this game, like the previous games, are designed by Connie Kazmaier and Dan Kazmaier, and again, the only things that they have designed yet to date are Chai and its expansion, Chai High Tea. But they've done a really good job with this. They're very nicely produced, great components. They did a good job delivering, and Chai is a very popular game. So I feel like you are in fairly good hands with this. And that's why this game is medium heavy. It's for 1 to 2 players, and I'm listing it as a medium high risk. Probably normally it would have been high, but the Kazmaiers have done such a good job with Chai and Chai High Tea that I'm sort of promoting them from high to medium high risk. So a little less risk than normal. Now, the art on this is handled by 3 artists. You've got Andrew Bosley, who's new to the team with this game. Previously, he's worked on Blood Bowl, Team Manager, the card game, Citadels, Everdell, Love Letter, Mission Red Planet 2nd Edition, and Tapestry. And then the 2 artists who worked on Chai and Chai High Tea have returned. That is Mary Hastick, and all she's really worked on is Chai, and Sahana Vijay, and again, all she's worked on is Chai. So you've got a team here that really kind of started mostly with Chai and Chai High Tea, and they are continuing their work on this new, smaller, more complex 1 to 2 player game. Now, it is a smaller price point on this game. It's not a huge game. So for $39, you're going to get the deluxe edition of Chai Tea for Two. If you really like this publisher and you want to really help support them, you can pledge the very, very high level of it, $200, which will get you the Master Edition. And what that means is you're going to get a laser-cut, handcrafted wooden box and then a personally engraved metal plate mounted on the box. So none of that is anything that anyone needs to play this game. The only reason you really want to pledge that level is if you love Chai, you love Chai Tea, you love Steep Games and what they're doing, and you want to help them continue to produce games of a similar or better quality in the future. So if you want to do that, by all means, throw some money at them, pledge $200. If you just want to really enjoy the game, the $39 version is what you want. And it is the deluxe edition, so it's going to be really nice. And again, this game will fund on June 4th and tentatively deliver in February 2022. The third game on our list is Tussie Mussie, the expansion collection. And this will fund on June 5th and tentatively deliver in October 2021. It's being produced by Button Shy Games, and they make these wallet-sized games, and they kind of distribute everything in-house, so they're able to have a quicker turnaround because of their production system, and because they're producing these smaller, generally 18-card games. So the asking price on this one was $2,000, very, very small, because Button Shy can't afford to produce their game at a smaller amount. But they've done really well, and right now they have $98,000. So they're already funding at an enormous amount compared to their minimum requested funding of 49 times. I would call Tussie Mussie a light game. It's for 1 to 4 players, and I think the risk here with Button Shy is medium-low. They do these campaigns a lot. They always deliver them successfully. They're very much in a groove with what they're doing. I think you're very safe with a Button Shy pledge. And if you're curious about Tussie Mussie itself, it has existed previously. This is a Kickstarter for a few expansions. So the original game is on Board Game Geek, and it's currently rated at 7.0. Now, this game is a card game that uses a mechanic called I Cut You Choose, which means one player usually offers a couple cards to the other player, the second player chooses them, and then the first player gets whatever's left over. Kind of like, I think, the best way if you're cooking food with someone. One person can kind of serve the food and try to make it equal, and then the other person takes what they want, and the cook gets whatever is left, which incentivizes the person creating the portions to divide them equally. Because if they divide them very unequally, then the player choosing is going to choose the much better thing, and the player who offered it is going to get stuck with something very bad. So that's kind of generally how that mechanic works. Now, Button Shy has done many games in the past. The 3 of theirs that are the most well-known are probably Circle the Wagons, Sprawlopolis, and Tussie Mussie. This game is designed by Elizabeth Hargrave, who has previously designed Mariposas, the original Tussie Mussie, and Wingspan. And the art on this is by Beth Sobel, who has done a lot of good games. She has done the art for Arboretum, Between Two Cities, Calico, Herbaceous, Lanterns of the Harvest Festival, Snowtails, Viticulture Essential Edition, Wingspan, and World's Fair 1893. Now, price points on this one: if you pledge at the $10 level, you will get the Tussie Mussie expansion collection, which includes essentially 4 expansions. So you're going to get the 3 new expansions called Greenery, Orange Set, and Ribbons. And then you're going to get a 4th expansion for the solo game, which is called Flower Shop Customers. So that's going to give you more variability in the solo mode. And you already need to have the solo mode to play this. So it'll add on to the solo mode, and that solo mode is called Flower Shop. Now, if you pledge at the $20 level, you will get everything Tussie Mussie except for the solo mode. So essentially, that takes the first pledge level and adds the base game onto it. If you want to pledge a little bit more, $22, you will get everything Tussie Mussie with the solo mode. And I think if you're going to do the $20 pledge level, you might as do the $22 pledge level, because you want to have that solo mode so that you can also play the solo mode expansion you'll be getting. And I think with a game like this, it's valuable to have a solo mode, because then you can play it yourself in a few minutes on lunch breaks and things like that. So why not spend the extra $2 and get that pledge instead of the $20 pledge without the solo mode? My personal opinion. And then if you really kind of want to go deeper into the Button Shy collection, there's a pledge level called Button Shy Instant Collection. It's $40. It will get you everything Tussie Mussie and everything Sprawlopolis, which is another of their biggest titles. And that comes with the Sprawlopolis base game, and then 3 expansions for that called Beaches, Interstate, and Rectar. And again, Tussie Mussie will fund on June 5th and tentatively deliver this October 2021. From there, we go to the 4th game on this list. That is Paperback Adventures. And this one's going to fund on June 8th. It will tentatively deliver in February 2022. Their minimum funding goal for this was $30,000. They currently have $267,000, which means they've got 9 times their minimum requested funding. I would call Paperback Adventures a medium-light game. It's for 1 to 2 players, and I think the risk on this one is medium-low. It is essentially a 1-player solo experience, but there are variant rules so that you can play it cooperatively with 2 players. Now, this is by the team who has done like paperback and hardback, which are these deck builder games. Those are designed for multiple players, but they're deck builder games that are based around words and letters. It's almost like Scrabble, the deck builder. And I'm not a huge fan of word games in my board games, but I cannot deny that paperback and hardback are very, very well designed, and they play exceedingly well. They're great games. Now, this new one, Paperback Adventures, is being published by Fowers Games, who have done Burgle Bros, which you may know, and Burgle Bros 2, a game called Fugitive, and then hardback and paperback. And it is designed by Tim Fowers, and Fowers Games, as you can tell, is his company, so he has designed all of those games. And also designing on this one is Sky Larson. This is Sky Larson's first game. Sky Larson just, I believe, got his master's degree in creative writing, so this is his first sort of venturing into the board game world. Now, the art here is by Ryan Goldsberry, who, like Tim Fowers, has worked on all of their games. So he's worked on Burgle Bros, Fugitive, hardback, and paperback. So if you like those games, I mean, this is that same team, and you're going to be getting something here from that team. I think if you like that team, you should have confidence and faith in this. And it's really interesting to me, this game, this kind of deck building solo game where it's a system that they've created. So you're getting the game system, and then there are sort of 3 books that you can play, and you can pledge at any level to get those books. So let's just talk about those pledge levels right now. So for $35 at the best seller pledge level, it's called, you're going to get the core game and then 1 character pack, because they're essentially 3 character packs. And I think in the future, what you're going to see is more Kickstarters using the same core game with more and more packs. So this could become something that has a lot of expansions and a lot of gameplay as time goes on. For the $59 pledge level called Killer Sequel, you're going to get that core base game and 2 of the character packs. And for the $79 pledge level called the Complete Trilogy, you'll get the core game system and all 3 of the character packs that are currently available. Now again, this will fund on June 8th and tentatively deliver in February 2022. I don't know if this is a game that I'm going to pledge myself, but I'm really intrigued by it, and I really want to get my hands on it at some point and check it out. And I think if I don't pledge it now, I will likely pledge it at a future Kickstarter date when there's more stuff, and then I'll get even more things. I think is probably what I'll do. Following that is number 5 on the list, Mosaic, A Story of Civilization. And I'm really interested in this one because it's by Glenn Drover, who is a really good designer. Recently, he's been doing Raccoon Tycoon and Lizard Wizard and publishing them through his own label, Forbidden Games, which he's doing here again. But this one has a bigger scope than those. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but let me get back to the things I should be doing at the top of the listing. Mosaic will fund on June 9th, and it will tentatively deliver in January 2022. The minimum requested funding on this game is $100,000, which is much bigger than some of the other games we've been talking about. And the reason is that there's a lot of plastic in this game. Mosaic is a civilization game, essentially, and there's a lot of plastic pieces, different kind of buildings and things, but we'll get to this. So $100,000 was their minimum requested funding. They're currently sitting at $613,000, or 6 times their minimum requested funding. Now, this game is a medium-heavy game. It plays 2 to 6 players, and I would put the risk on this one at medium-low because Glenn Drover and his company Forbidden Games have done such a great bang-up job delivering all of their past Kickstarters. Also, Mosaic is a civilization game, and it's going to use card drafting and action selection to accomplish that civilization building. It is published by Forbidden Games, which is Glenn Drover's company. They have previously published Extraordinary Adventures Pirates, Lizard Wizard, Raccoon Tycoon, and Railroad Rivals. And Glenn Drover, the man behind the company, has previously designed Age of Empires 3, The Age of Discovery, Empires, Age of Discovery, which is essentially a reprinting of that other game. I think they took some of the glut out of the title, so it didn't seem as overwhelming to pronounce. As well as Lizard Wizard, Raccoon Tycoon, and Railways of the World, which is one of my favorite train games, Railways of the World. Now, because this is a big civilization game, there are a handful of artists on this one as well. There are 7 different artists on this game. So first up is Jared Blando, who has worked on 1830 Railways and Robber Barons, Cloudspire, Legacy of Dragonholt, and the original Steam. Also on board is Hendrik Noack, who's worked on Feed the Kraken and Glenmore 2 Chronicles. Jacoby O'Connor, this appears to be his first published game. Gregor Pedrick, who's worked on Clockwork Wars, Dinogenics, and Draconis Invasion. Jessica Riola, who's worked on Tesla vs. Edison, War of Currents. Erica Rossi, and this appears to be her first big published game. And Annie Stegg, who's been a recent collaborator of Glenn Drover, having worked on both Lizard Wizard and Raccoon Tycoon. Now, there are essentially 2 pledge levels on this one, so it doesn't get very complicated. You've got a $79 pledge level called The Sphinx, which will give you the Kickstarter version of this game. And then for $149, you've got the Colossus, which is the Kickstarter exclusive edition. Now, personally, I think it may not be the best naming convention to name one pledge the Kickstarter edition and the other pledge the Kickstarter exclusive edition, because, I don't know, they're too close to each other and you kind of think you're getting everything with the Kickstarter edition. Not the case. So the difference here is that the more expensive one, the Colossus, the Kickstarter exclusive edition, is going to come with 4 of their add-on packs, their update packs, which essentially will give you things like metal coins, a lot of plastic components, and nicer wooden resources. Kind of the normal stuff you get with these Kickstarter upgrades. But just know those things won't be in the $79 Kickstarter edition, the Sphinx pledge. So if you want the version with kind of all the plastic and all the stuff, you want that $149 version. If you want the kind of smaller footprint game that doesn't have all the big miniature plastic buildings, instead you just want kind of the cardboard tokens, it's going to play just as well. It won't look as impressive, but you can get that version of the game for $79. And that's the kind of 2 versions here that are on offer. Also, neither one of these pledges will include the neoprene mat, so if you want that, that's going to be a $39 add-on. And for something like this, I'd probably recommend getting that. I mean, for me, a civilization game with a really nice look on the table with some nice plastic pieces from the designer of Railways of the World and Raccoon Tycoon and Lizard Wizard, this is a big yes for me. I'm a huge Glenn Drover fan. I think he makes games of enormous quality, both in design and, look component-wise, and a civilization game from him is something that is very exciting to me. So this one looks pretty cool. And again, this game will fund on June 9th and tentatively deliver January 2022. From there, we go to the 6th game on our list, which is Lockup Breakout Expansion. And this will fund on June 11th, tentatively deliver in February 2022. Their minimum requested funding was $20,000. Right now they have $50,000, which puts them at 2.5 times their minimum requested funding. This is a medium light game for 1 to 5 players, and I would put the risk on this at medium low. So this is an expansion to a game that already exists called Lockup, which is sort of set in the role player world, and it is a worker placement game. So that game right now has a rating on Board Game Geek of 7.4, just if you're wondering these things. And this is a worker placement and area majority game in general, and the Breakout expansion will essentially add on these catacombs, and it's a way that characters can escape the jail through the catacomb system, and adds on, kind of more board space and some more mechanics. Now, this is being published by Thunderworks Games, who have done Cartographers, the original Lockup, and Role Player. It is designed by Stan Kordonsky, who's about to blow up in a huge way. He has some really good designs that he's been working on in the recent past and coming. So those include Dice Hospital, Endless Winter, Paleo-Americans, the original Lockup game, and Rurik Dawn of Kiev. Now, there are 4 different artists on this game. There is Luis Francisco, who's worked on The Bloody Inn, Coup, Flashpoint Fire Rescue, Fuse, The Resistance Avalon, and Role Player. Also Gong Studios, who've worked on Aeon's End, The New Age, and Tiny Towns. Lucas Ribeiro, who's worked on Cartographers, Lockup, and Space Cantina. And Diego Sa, who's worked on Comic Hunters. And the price points on this one are for $19 you get Breakout. So that is the new expansion. So if you already own Lockup and you just want this new expansion for it, $19. If you want to get the base game and the new expansion, $65 pledge, that will get you Lockup and Breakout. And again, this game will fund on June 11th and deliver in February 2022. And I think the big reason to get this is the fact that it is designed by Stan Kordonsky. I have Rurik Dawn of Kiev and Endless Winter Paleo-Americans both coming to me. I pledged both of those Kickstarters, and I've heard amazing things about both of those games. So I personally don't have any experience with Lockup, but another Stan Kordonsky design and an expansion for that seems good to me. After that, the 7th game is Maximum Apocalypse Wasted Wilds. Now, this game will also fund on June 11th. It will hopefully tentatively deliver in June 2022. The minimum requested funding on this was $50,000. They're currently sitting at $228,000, which is about 4.5 their minimum requested funding. This I would put at a medium light complexity. It is for 1 to 4 players, and I would probably put the risk on this one at medium high. The original game, Maximum Apocalypse, is rated on Board Game Geek at 7.6 currently. Now, it is a cooperative card game that uses action points and pick up and deliver. And you're essentially building a tableau grid of all these cards, and then you've got characters that you are walking across the cards with to different locations and generally looking for things that you need to fulfill to win the mission. So it's kind of mission-based. The one kind of negative I've heard about Maximum Apocalypse from several reviewers that I've seen, like Z Garcia, is that the game requires quite a bit of setup and some takedown, and then the game time can be very variable. So when you sit down to set up the game and it takes you kind of a bit of time to get everything set up, the game could last anywhere from 20 minutes to a couple hours, depending on how the randomization works and if it kind of goes your way or not. I think for some players that could be a little bit of a negative, not knowing how long the game length is going to be, and then kind of going through the setup process only to find that your game ends like that, or that it goes on, when in either case you might be wanting the other experience. So there is some variability in how long the game is going to play. Other than that, it looks pretty cool to me. It's like this post-apocalyptic card game with action selection where you're walking around the board and doing things. And there's a lot of variability because there are several expansions already and different modules and things, and you can throw stuff into the game depending on what you want your apocalypse to look like. So there's different kind of creatures and enemies and things, from aliens to zombies to all kinds of things, which I think is a strength of the game and what makes it look so cool. So this is published by Rock Manor Games, and they have previously published The Few and Cursed, the original Maximum Apocalypse, and a game called Set a Watch. And it is designed by Mike Nade. Rock Manor Games is Mike Nade's company, so he essentially designs everything that they publish. So he has designed those same games. Now, the art on this is by Gustav Rangmar, and he did the art on the original Maximum Apocalypse game. So if you know that, if you're familiar with it, if you like the art, this will be the same, which I think is always good if you have art done in a similar way by the same artist as the original game, so that the expansion fits with it and makes sense and looks of a piece. Now, there are a few different pledge points on this one. For $60, you're going to get the new stuff, Wasted Wilds. If you don't have the other stuff, you can get it here. For $96, you will get all the new gameplay goodness. That's what the pledge level is actually called, which will include not only Wasted Wilds, but some other new expansion modules called Time Traveler and Few and Cursed. And I believe you could also get those as add-ons, but if you want everything, you're better off just pledging at the $96 pledge level. Now, if you don't have the base game and you need to get that, and you want to get that here, and you want to get everything together, you can do that. That is going to be $199. It is called the Complete Gameplay Bundle, and that will get you the original Maximum Apocalypse Kickstarter Legendary Edition, plus all of the new stuff, Wasted Wilds, Time Traveler, Few and Cursed. So if you go and you kind of look at the gameplay and you think it looks really cool, and you don't mind what I was talking about, the kind of one big negative, which is the variable playtime, and you don't have the original, that's your price point, $199. And again, this will fund on June 11th and tentatively deliver in June 2022. At number 8 on our list is Path of Light and Shadow Solstice. And this is, again, another expansion to a game that already exists. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But it will fund on June 11th. It will tentatively deliver in March 2022. Their minimum requested funding for this was $20,000. They're currently sitting at $63,000, which means they're over 3 times their asking price. This is a medium-heavy game for 2 to 4 players, and I would put the risk on this at medium-low. Now, the base game has been out for a couple of years. It is currently listed on Board Game Geek at a 7.5. Which is pretty good. This is another Civilization game, kind of like Mosaic, the one we talked about earlier by Glenn Drover. However, this one is more simple, I believe. The 2 big mechanics at work here are deck building and area majority. So this one is published by Stronghold Games, and Stronghold Games is a company that's published a lot of games. So I am about to list all the games that they have published in the BGG Top 1000. Get ready for this. It includes Among the Stars, Australia, CO2 Second Chance, Coffee Roasters, Core Worlds, Cottage Garden, Diamonds, 2nd edition, Democker, Fabled Fruit, Fields of Green, Flamme Rouge, Forum Trajanum, Lagrange, Great Western Trail, Kanban Driver's Edition, Kitchen Rush, Nations the Dice Game, Not Alone, New Valona, Panamax, Paper Tales, Pictomania, The Pursuit of Happiness, Survive, Escape from Atlantis, Terraforming Mars, That's Pretty Clever, Twice as Clever, and Village. So they published a lot of games. They're a big publisher. Let's talk about the designers, because I think that'll give you more insight into whether or not this game is for you. It is co-designed by Travis Chance and Nick Little. Travis Chance has worked on Heroes, Legendary Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the original Path of Light and Shadow. Nick Little has worked on Anne's End Legacy, Legendary Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the original Path of Light and Shadow. And the art on this is Naomi Robinson, who's worked on Fields of Green, Hands in the Sea, and Kanban Driver's Edition. Now for this one, for $39, for the pledge level called For the Hinterlands, which seems to be stealing something out of World of Warcraft, For the Horde, but this is For the Hinterlands. And the Hinterlands is actually a region in World of Warcraft, so interesting. Anyway, $39 for the Hinterlands, you will get the new expansion only. If you don't have the base game and you want to get that, you need to get that, and you will need to get that to play the expansion. $109 for the Realm will get you the new expansion and the base game. And again, this will fund on June 11th and hopefully tentatively deliver in March 2022. Now, after that, number 9 on the list is The Witcher Old World. This will also fund on June 11th and tentatively hopefully deliver in June 2022. Now, this game had a minimum requested funding of $305,000. However, they have sailed way past that. They are currently sitting at $3.9 million, which is 12.5 times their requested minimum funding. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that The Witcher is a huge IP that spans novels, video games, television now with the Netflix show. So there are a lot of people potentially interested in this that aren't necessarily board gamers. What that also means is that they have designed a game that can be played easily by many people, including non-gamers. So you are going to get a game here that is, from the videos that I've watched and the people that I look at it and more or less trust, they've said that it's a fairly well-designed game. But just know who it's being designed for. This is not a huge campaign game on the level of CMON, where they're going to throw in all these expansions and you're going to get this giant, boxes and boxes and boxes, and it's going to span the entire, Witcher world. In fact, the game here takes place 10 years before Geralt of Rivia and the events of kind of the Witcher games and stuff. So it's sort of a prequel game in a way, and it's going to use different characters than the ones that you may be familiar with from the Witcher, books and video games and things. Just know that if you are deep into board gaming and you like heavy, complex games and big campaigns, this is not going to be the kind of game that's going to have every sort of wish list item in your head of what a Witcher board game could be. This is not a deep dive. This is more of a narrative choice game, so you will be kind of making choices and reading and stuff, and a deck building game, and it's on the lighter end. So just know all that going in. Now, this game is published by Go On Board, who have only done 2 previous games, Titans and Valhalla, and that's the reason that this game is still on a high risk. It's a publisher who, in my mind, is still fairly untested because they've only done 2 games. Titans did have miniatures in it, so at least there's that. One of my worries with these big kind of miniatures games, especially with newer companies, is that they just haven't done anything on that scale before. Go On Board has, because they did Titans, but Titans isn't a game that I know anyone that has played it or has it. I don't know anyone that backed it or anyone that has it. So in my mind, there's still a big question mark here, and they're doing this huge, big IP game. So I think that there is some risk involved in this. Just know that. However, from what I've seen, it looks good, and I'm willing to take that risk. I think I probably will. So just know there's a big risk on this one, but personally I'm taking it. So probably. This game is designed by Lucas Wozniak, who previously did 7 Days of Westerplatte, King and Assassins, Titans, and Valhalla. So Go On Board seems to be his company and is putting out now the games that he's designing. So that includes Valhalla, Titans, and now The Witcher Old World. There are 18 different artists on this game, and I'm not going to sit here and list them all and list all of their credits. So the one artist I am going to talk about briefly is Damian Mamelidi. He's doing the board art and some of the key art. And then those other 18 artists will be working on all the card art and all of that stuff. So Damian has worked on Brass Birmingham, Brass Lancashire, Edge of Darkness, and Tyrants of the Underdark. I really, really like his art. I think the board will look fantastic. And I feel like it wouldn't be productive or helpful for me to sit here and list 18 artists and their credits. So Damian Mamelidi it is. Now this has 2 different pledge points. Again, this is not going to follow that CMON model where they're going to add all these expansions and it's going to be a $500 to $800 all-in thing. This is a little bit smaller and designed to be more accessible to everyone. So you've got 2 price points on this. You've got the $86 standard box, and then you've got the $153 deluxe box, which is going to include upgrades and more stuff. Also, there are 2 things that won't be included in either one of those pledge levels. One of them is the Mounted Eridan miniature, which is going to be an add-on for about $10. And the other one are metal coins, which are going to be an add-on for about $18. Now, essentially, the deluxe box is going to contain like the plastics and the kind of, nicer upgraded stuff. So if you don't want the miniatures, if you just want the gameplay, you can get that $86 standard box. If you want all the miniatures and kind of all the nice stuff, you want that $153 deluxe box. But don't forget the Mounted Eridan miniature and the metal coins are add-ons, if you want those. Now, this game will fund again on June 11th and tentatively deliver June 2022. That brings us to the 10th and final game on this list, called Buru. Buru will fund on June 14th. It will hopefully tentatively deliver in May 2022. They had a $20,000 minimum requested funding for this one. They're currently sitting at $74,000, which is 3.5 times their asking price. I would put this one at medium light for 1 to 4 players and a high risk. And the reason that it's a high risk is this is a company that has not published that many games before, and what they have published has been on a smaller scale. Now, it is an auction, bidding, and worker placement game, which is pretty cool. You're going to be doing a lot of bidding to kind of figure out what spaces you're going to be able to take and what the rewards will be. It is published by Crafty Games, who has previously done Dollars to Donuts and Mistborn House War. Now, there is a group of 3 designers on this. 2 of them, Stephen Wren and Alex Flagg, have not published anything before. So this is their first published design. And then the third designer is Taryn Lewis Kratz, who's worked on a game called Helionox: The Last Sunset. So it's 3 fairly new designers and a publisher that has not done that much. And then the artists on this are Angar Adarasa, who's worked on Mistfall, Cymurg, and Shadow Rift, and Dan May, who's worked on Black Orchestra, Everdell, and Nothing Personal. So the price points on this, they get a little high, so just be aware. For $59, you can get the Buru base game. If you want the deluxe version, which is going to have things like silk-screened resources, game trays, and explorer tokens with these gold accenting on them, that's going to be the deluxe version, and the pledge price on that is $79. However, there's also an expansion that you can get. And if you want the deluxe version of the game with the expansion, you're going to want the all gameplay pledge, which is $99. But there's more. For $129, there is an all-in that will also include a playmat, these coconut resource bowls, and card sleeves. Now, I thought about maybe, if I did pledge it, which I don't think I'm going to, but if I did, I thought about maybe getting the playmat and the sleeves, but not those resource bowls. But if you add those on as add-ons, you're going to be paying more than that $129, so you might as well just do the $129. Also know, though, I don't talk about shipping anymore because I don't want to bake in these shipping prices and then have people in different countries go and have it be different. So I'm just talking about the pledges not including shipping. But I am a US citizen. I live in the US, and I feel like my videos are kind of a little more geared towards US citizens. So just know that the shipping on this one for the US is $30, which is a lot more than we're used to. We're very privileged. We get a lot of low shipping prices here. That's gone up a little bit because of the pandemic and things that have been happening in the Suez Canal and just kind of production in general that's happened as a result of the pandemic. But so far, we haven't seen prices skyrocket too much. $30, I feel like, is a lot. And so if you get the all-in, which is $129, plus $30 in shipping, that's $159. This is a game that I'm intrigued by and interested in, but it is a medium-light worker placement auction bidding game. I'm not that huge into auction bidding, and for $159, for me personally, I think I would want to be paying about half that if I was pledging this game. I think this game is about twice what I want to be playing for a very light worker placement Euro with auction bidding. So I probably won't bid Buru, but I think it looks good and I'm interested in it, and I wish I could get it at a much cheaper price. And if there are people out there that don't mind the price, I still think this is a good game to be pledging, so that's why it's on this list. But just be aware that the price point on this one is, I think, a lot higher than what people are used to paying for these kinds of games. So just my opinion, but just be aware. I want to let you know that out of the gate. Oh, and if you're living in China or Hong Kong, the shipping there is half this. So instead of paying $30, you'll be paying whatever the equivalent of is of like $15 US. So it's going to be a lot less. So China and Hong Kong are really going to win out in this one. And that's not always the case, you know. Usually the US has very preferential shipping. Not this time. Again, though, if you do want this, Buru will fund on June 14th and tentatively deliver May 2022. So that brings us to the end of the currently running Kickstarters. Now I'm going to do a very quick section on the games that I backed from my previous video. So I backed Florence, which is the new Braincrack Games game in a sort of spiritual trilogy with Ragusa and Venice. I own the two previous games. I like them both a lot. And Florence just looked crazy with the way it used worker placement and this kind of rondel with these three characters who will kind of move around the board, and you interact with each of them, and they sort of have different personalities that affect their mechanics and their kind of reward systems. And I probably already was going to back Florence just on the strength of the other two games. I think Lewis Shaw is doing a great job producing these games in general. And so Florence, I think, was already probably going to be backed by me, but the components with the sort of meeples that they have and the nature of the game design, which includes sort of Italian Renaissance era families bragging. There's even these like meeples in a bragging position. And you're trying to brag to the other noble families in the area, specifically this kind of ruling family that has these three individuals who you're going to be currying favor with. It just looks so unique and so fun and so well produced and such great components. So that was a back for me. I also backed Hoplomachus Victorum, which is the new Chip Theory Games game. Chip Theory Games does Too Many Bones, Cloudspire, and now Burn Cycle. And this was actually their first game. They kind of got famous doing this game, but component-wise, it wasn't as good as all the games that came after. So they're doing a new version of this game and kind of updating some old stuff to bring it in line with all of the component quality of their current stuff. And it is sort of an arena fighter. It's Chip Theory Games, so it was a back for me. I'm really looking forward to playing it. It's got a very deep solo mode, which I'm excited about, which should come as no surprise because all Chip Theory games play really, really well solo. I also backed Railways of Sweden, Australia, and Rail Barons of the World. I love Railways of the World. It's one of my favorite train games. So a couple new maps and a new deck that adds solo play across 7 different maps. So this just seemed like a great thing for me. I also backed Vivid Memories, which is a very interesting kind of tile placement set collection game where you're placing these plastic pieces inside someone's brain and then scoring, based on that throughout the game. It's an abstract strategy game, but I think the design of it with the tile placement and the fact that you're in a brain, this is very cool. Something that I wanted to back and support, and looks like a lot of fun. I think it's a game that my fiance may really like. She tends to really like the kind of medium light stuff, especially if it's very well designed with vibrant colors and just cool components. And then finally I backed Vengeance Roll and Fight, which is a roll and write game set in the Vengeance universe. The original Vengeance game was sort of an action point game with all these miniatures where you are the protagonist who has been wronged, in the vein of something like Kill Bill or Old Boy or the old spaghetti westerns or Kurosawa movies, and you're just kind of going through this big adventure and trying to mow down everybody that you can, all the minions, and get to the bosses and take down the bosses that have done you wrong. The one negative I'd heard about Vengeance in the past is that it does have a lot of miniatures, and the miniatures don't really do anything. They just kind of sit down all over the board as you go to them to try to take them down, which it would sort of prevented me from acquiring it, I think. It seemed like a really neat game, but a lot of unnecessary setup with all these miniatures that don't actually do anything. This is a roll and write version of that, which is why it's called Roll and Fight. It's also designed by David Turksey, who I really, really like, so I backed this campaign for these 2 new roll and write versions of the game. I did not get the original Vengeance, which I'm curious about, but I just don't think I need or I want to have. I also don't have a lot of roll and write games. I've played a couple that I really like Cartographers and Welcome To. I own Roman Roll, which is also by David Turksey, and it's a very kind of bigger, more complex roll and write game, and I really like that one. I also backed 7 Bridges in the past, which I did not like at all, and that is currently sitting on my sell pile. So I don't have a lot of roll and write games, and I backed this one for a combination of the Turksey design and the fact that I like the theming of the game, and this seemed to me like a better way to incorporate that theming with a smaller footprint on the table. So that completes the backed section for this video, and now I will move on to the acquired games. So I've got 5 games to talk about here. The first one is Barrage. And this is a little bit different. I didn't actually receive the game. I received a couple extras. Now, these are extras that were carryovers from the Barrage 5th player expansion campaign, which was done in part to get some of the extras to backers who received damaged goods during the original Barrage campaign. So I feel like I need to just talk about this for a moment. So I'm going to. So I pledged the original Barrage, and I got the game, and I think it's a fantastic game. Vital Lacerda is one of my favorite designers of all time, And I think the game Barrage, the design for Barrage, fits right up there with any Lacerda games. It's great. However, Cranio Creations, who did the Kickstarter, completely botched the components. They just did an awful job. Awful job. And there were things that came broken. There were wheels that didn't really work. It was just a mess. It was one of the biggest Kickstarter messes that I've been associated with. I haven't been involved in Kickstarter for too long, a few years, 2-3 years. And I've done a lot of research on stuff. So I've tried really hard not to back things that could be problematic. So I haven't had too many bad experiences. But Barrage was problematic. They did a 3D board in the original campaign that didn't really turn out the way that people liked. I think it's kind of cool. I'll probably continue to use the 3D board, but I think it's really not essential, and it is kind of not that well produced. So if you are late in the day now thinking of acquiring Barrage at some point, I probably wouldn't bother with that 3D board if you can even find it. But in addition to that, there were kind of all these component issues. And they found that they were losing so much money trying to fix them that they did a second campaign for a 5th player expansion. And then baked into that Kickstarter campaign were more solutions for some of the component issues. So I went ahead and I backed that campaign to get these nicer wooden wheels. Part of what the game has are these kind of wheels, and you put resources in the wheels, and then you turn the wheels, and you're not going to get use of those resources until they've kind of completed their circuit and come back around. It's a really smart, kind of cool design. The problem is that their original wheels were made out of cardboard, and as you would turn them, the little dividing pieces of the wheel that separated the sections out would bend and move, and the little kind of wooden components that are supposed to be going around this wheel would slide under it and get caught. It was just not well made and kind of a disaster. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to pay a little bit more. I'm going to get these nice wooden wheels, and then I'm also going to be able to get all of the other component issues resolved through this campaign for free, because that's kind of something that they were offering. And so I didn't pay much for that second Barrage Extras campaign. And that's okay. I paid what I needed to do to get the wooden wheels and to kind of get the things fixed. The problem is what they sent me was also broken. So this was the second delivery. This was to correct a first Kickstarter, and a lot of those things came broken. So then I wrote to them and I told them, and I didn't get any response for a long time. And then eventually the contact at Cranio Creations, who'd been responsible for this, was fired for doing a bad job. And a new person was hired named David something. I don't know his last name. And he started out trying to right the wrongs. So he had a third delivery sent to me to give me those components that still were broken through the first 2 shippings. And that shipping was not properly packed, and the components sent there were also broken. I talked to David again, and he talked with the warehouse guys who had packed it improperly against the specifications that he'd given them. And so they sent me a 4th shipment, and that shipment finally arrived with the items that were still broken, properly packed and unbroken. So it only took me 4 deliveries and something like 3 years to get the components sent to me not damaged. Okay, so it was a huge mess. On the other hand, I do really, really appreciate his work and the fact that Cranio Creations and David kept at it and kept sending me things until I finally got a proper unbroken, version of all the components in the game. So it's kind of, there's 2 sides to this, right? There's the fact that there was this incompetence that lasted over multiple years and multiple shipments being broken that never should have happened. And I'll probably never back anything by Cranio Creations again. I don't need to play these games and have, delivery last years and years and multiple campaigns just to get something, sent competently. On the other hand, I am glad that they didn't just, after the second or third time, tell me to go fuck myself or something. I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm glad that they kept with it. So I'm grateful to finally get this stuff. It just never should have taken that long, and something I feel like should be mentioned. But those items finally came. I also received my Kickstarter for Destinies, which was originally called Time of Legends Destinies. And this is a very interesting game, Destinies. It is essentially a campaign game, almost on the level of a legacy game, because you're going to be playing through scenarios that have set conversations and things. It's not going to change from game to game. And even when you go and you play on different characters, yeah, you're going to have different stats, and encounters may go a different way. In some cases, you may fail certain tests or pass certain tests that you didn't another time, but there's nothing randomized in the game. So you're essentially playing with the same game setup, the same NPCs, the same dialogues, the same resources, everything's the same. So I don't see a lot of replay value in it. And it's something that I talked about in my first impressions video, which has been up for a while. And if you want more on Destinies, you can go watch that video. I am looking forward to playing through all of the different scenarios. I just know that there's very little replay value. And I thought that there would be more replay value originally. I didn't think that it was going to be this kind of very limited campaign, almost to the level of a legacy game. But such as it is, I think I will enjoy that campaign. And I think in the future, Lucky Duck Games, who published it, will probably make more expansions. Just know that those are always going to be these kind of very, very limited replayability scenarios. So, but it is neat. It's really cool what's happening in the game, and it's this kind of miniatures narrative exploration game. It's something that's normally done cooperatively, but in this game it's done competitively, and that makes Destinies very unique and very cool, just not with a lot of replayability. I also received Embarcadero, which I'm very excited for. It's sort of a lighter Euro-y game, an economic game, and it is set in the San Francisco Bay, and it is based on something that used to actually happen and sort of changed San Francisco's landscape, which is, in San Francisco, they would have these boats come in with goods on them, and then essentially those boats would not be good for transport anymore. So a lot of times what they would do is they'd take these old boats and these old boat hulls, and they would integrate them into the San Francisco Bay area of stores and things. So you'd have these stores that were built out of the husks and hulls of boats. And that is part of the mechanics in this game, where you're going to use resources coming on these boats, and then you're going to sort of cannibalize the boats to create space and build new buildings. And I think it's really cool. I haven't really seen anything do that before. The theme really, really intrigued me, but the graphic design and the components looked really good too. So this is something that I intend to get a first impressions video made for in the future. However, before I get to that, I'm kind of playing catch up on some games from 2020 and getting first impressions videos made for those, and that includes CloudAge, Curious Cargo, Merv, and Kanban EV. So I'm going to be, as I mentioned at the top, I'm going to be off on a little mini vacation for a couple days this week. And when I get back, and next week, I'll be catching up on those games. But after that, a few weeks out, eventually I'll be doing a first impressions video for Embarcadero. So just know that that is coming eventually, and it's a game that I think looks really cool and I'm pretty excited about. I also received Middara Act 1. Now, that is a game that I won't be producing content for in the future because the actual Middara game is from a couple years ago, so it's nothing new. There will be content coming out for Middara in another year. I think at the end of this year, maybe it's pushed to next year, but that will be Acts 2 and 3. And I am planning on launching a Twitch channel later this year, and I think you probably will see a lot of gameplay from Middara on the Twitch channel. But just know that I probably won't be doing reviews on Middara until I've finished most of the game. And so you're going to see most of my content for Middara on that eventual Twitch channel. But I'm really excited. It is a huge, epic dungeon crawler done in kind of like a Japanime style, something you probably see in video games, but hasn't really been done on tabletop before. And it's got just a huge, enormous narrative. The first game is supposed to be big, but now they have these 2 additional games that are going to supplement it. So it's going to be 3 big acts. And I think it's probably the biggest dungeon crawler made to date, especially when you put all 3 games together. But I think any one game is kind of the size of like a Gloomhaven. What makes it a little bit different, though, is that it doesn't have the kind of unlockable nature so much of Gloomhaven of playing different characters. In Middara, you are playing the set party characters. I think it's 4 characters. And it's kind of, again, like Final Fantasy or something like that, where the party is the party, much like Sleeping Gods. So however many players you have playing the game, you will be controlling all of the party members. You're not just picking one character. You're figuring out how to subdivide the characters in the game and who's playing what. But you always will be playing with the full character set on Middara, whether you're playing solo or with 4 players. But I'm really excited. It's a huge, giant game that looks like a lot of fun and is doing something in the board game space that I think is very unique and very ambitious. And I like dungeon crawlers a lot. I've played a lot of RPGs and video games, so I'm looking forward to seeing a game that's doing that for tabletop, that's not holding anything back and is really just going crazy with it. And then the last game that I acquired is Oath: Chronicles of Empire and Exile, which is the new game from the Root team. So it's by Leader Games. It's got Kyle Farron on art. It's got Cole Worley designing. These are the same people who did Root and the art and publisher from Fort. And I like Root. I like everything about the design. I think Cole Worley is a fantastic designer. Pax Pamir is an amazing game. I've also recently pledged John Company, which is another of Cole's designs that he is kind of republishing a second edition through his own publishing company. But I'm really excited for Oath. And Oath is kind of similar to Root, I think, in terms of some of its sensibilities, but it's very much a card game. It doesn't have all of the kind of factions that Root does. When you play the game, whatever happens is going to influence the next game. Not even necessarily in a campaign, but just the way one game will affect the next game, which is very interesting and cool, and I'm really excited to see how it plays. And I think along with Embarcadero, you will see a first impressions video for Oath after I kind of get through some of that backlog from late 2020. I do have a backlog from early 2021 as well, but I'll be getting to that next, along with Embarcadero and Oath. So that completes the acquired section and brings me to the played section. And so this period I have 5 games that I've played. First on the list is CloudAge, which is no longer the new Alexander Pfister game because he now has more games on the way, more games. But I love Alexander Pfister. I think he's a great designer. I love Great Western Trail. Mombasa is fantastic. Pretty much everything that he does is really, really good. CloudAge did not land, I think, with as much positivity as a lot of his other games, which is why I'm getting to it so much later. And it is kind of simple mechanically once you learn it, in the sense that you are doing kind of some of the same things over and over. You've got a player board, which is an airship, and you're doing different things to upgrade it. But on the main board, which is not that big, you're traveling across it and gathering resources and doing combat in certain cities to gain more resources. But it's a little engine builder, essentially, where you're kind of managing resources and building this engine and kind of exploring a world. And I like it a lot, actually. It's really well produced. It's very compelling. I've only played the first scenario so far, which doesn't even include all of the mechanics. So my plan is to later this week or next week play the second or third scenario and then do a first impressions video. And then later I will probably play through the full campaign, probably on that Twitch channel that I've been mentioning. But I really like it, and I think maybe people passed by CloudAge because it didn't have the same huge positive reception as a lot of his other games. But so far, I'm really, really enjoying it, and I put it up there with his other games. I'll have to see how it evolves when I play the later scenario, and then as well once I play the campaign. But I'm liking it a lot. I've also played Destinies, which I mentioned is a competitive sort of narrative storytelling game. And I really like Destinies. I think it's fun to play. I just think the replayability is very, very limited. So I think there are 11 scenarios. I'll probably play them all, and then I'll probably sell off the game. I don't really see a reason to keep it around considering how limited the replayability is. And I think I will probably end up playing those scenarios again on the Twitch channel once I get it launched, because it is fun. It's really fun. And I think even for someone observing it, it's going to be a fun experience. So I think it's the kind of thing that should do well on Twitch in terms of, well, it's something that I would want to watch, especially if it's something that I may not end up buying because of the limited replayability. I think it's still fun to be able to take a look at it and see it. I also have played Maglev Metro. And Maglev Metro, I've done a first impressions video on it already. It's a very interesting train game where the items you are picking up and delivering are actually passengers, not just cubes, not just goods. And when you drop them off, you get to upgrade your player board. And it is an engine building game in many senses, because you're going to be always kind of upgrading this player board and making your train more powerful and able to go to more stations in one turn, build more track, pick up more people, carry more people, drop off more people. You can upgrade your ability so that your train can flip around and go in reverse before it hits the end of the line. There's an upgrade ability where you can add more people to a station if you want to get more people to pick up and deliver, so that you can then upgrade your player board with them. And there's all these other upgrades and things that affect end game scoring. But it's just a really solid game, really thoughtfully designed, with a lot of ability to do things, and it all feels very, very balanced. And so I'm really liking Maglev Metro before. It also has 2 board sides. So there is a New York side and a Berlin side, and I'm assuming that in the future they may put out more maps if it does well. But it is a really, really good, solid game. I've also played Merchant's Cove, and I've put out a first impressions video on that. And that game has so much content. I was only able to focus on less than half of it probably in my first impressions video, which was over an hour. But I did highlight all of the vendors that come in the base game. I didn't touch on the thief who's in the secret stash. He's kind of a hidden character. And I didn't talk about all the little modules in the secret stash, which I would do on a future video if I come back and do a full teaching review. I also do own the 3 expansion characters, the Innkeeper, the Dragon Rancher, and the Oracle. And so if I come back and do a full teaching review, I'll include those vendors as well, and I will have played it at higher player counts. I can say it's a really fun game, and it's really brightly colored. It's very inviting. You want to play this game when you see it. And it is a Euro. All players are kind of creating goods and then selling them. But every player has their own player board, and they all work I want to say very differently, but there are similar. So if you play one character, you can probably figure out the next with the little instruction booklets. But if you're teaching the game to a bunch of first-time players, you're probably going to need to teach everybody their vendor, which will take a little bit more time. So just know that. And on top of that, you've got this game happening where you're placing different meeples of different factions in boats, and you're vying with the other players to people those boats and then dock those boats, and the content of those boats will determine what goods you can sell. So there's this kind of heads down player board with your vendor. Everyone's doing something different. And then you've got this competition with the other players to determine endgame scoring and the boats that sell every round. One thing about Merchant's Cove, which I think could be a positive or a negative depending on the person, is just how much stuff there is. So you've got those 4 different vendors in the base game. You've got the hidden vendor in the secret stash. You've got 3 different expansion vendors. And then in the secret stash, you've got all these different modules that you can put in the game that change it up quite a bit. And you can combine them in different ways to change it up even more dramatically. And that's going to include these rogue cards that determine how players put meeples in the boats and how those meeples work. It affects the boats themselves, the sizes of the boats, and the kind of concentration of the boats. And then there's other kind of rules that you can put in that will affect things, and other different modules. And there's so much variability that I think if you play this game with your group and they really like it, you're going to be able to play this game for a long time and continually change it up with all these modules, which is very, very cool. But if you're the kind of player who just wants to play one game and have it be the same thing and play it once and know how to teach it and teach that to other players and then just kind of play that same thing over and over, there's a lot of glut in this game that you're not going to know what to do with. So just know there's a lot of content, and I think for the right person or group, it's going to be an amazing experience. And for someone maybe who wants a much more streamlined experience or a heavier game and doesn't want to deal with kind of all of the different variability in a lighter, simpler game, they may not want to deal with it. But for my money, it's really cool. It's a game I'm going to keep around for a long time. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to play it in different ways with newer gamers and lighter gamers. And it's a vibrant, fun game that wants you to play it. And I want to keep it on my shelf. And then the last game that I played was Santa Monica, which is designed by Josh Wood, who did The Cat Lady, which is one of my favorite lighter games. It is one of these very light games that has stellar components. The wood components in Cat Lady are awesome. Between the cats themselves and the different resources like cans of tuna and things, it is another game that is just vibrantly colored and sort of begs you to play it because it's so fun. I tend to be more of a heavier gamer myself, but when I see a light game like this, I just want to jump on it. So I already like Josh Wood, and I think he's a great designer and making some of the best games at that complexity level. And so I knew I would like Santa Monica, and I did. And in Santa Monica, you are basically taking turns drafting cards and then putting them into a tableau, which is 2 rows of the Santa Monica beach. And so you've got kind of like the roadside beach and then the waterside beach. And you're adding all these cards, and as you do, you're getting resources, you're getting people, and then as you put other cards out, you're trying to move around people to get them into certain scoring spaces, and you're trying to play certain cards next to each other to trigger a bunch of different scoring mechanisms at the end of the game. In some ways, it reminds me of the Castles of Mad King Ludwig, because you are placing these things together to get certain scoring opportunities to happen. It also reminds me a little bit of something like Parks, but maybe even a better comparison is Villagers, which also has kind of people on cards, and you're building a tableau with streets and you're moving around the people to score points. But unlike, say, Mad King Ludwig, it's a lighter game, and it does what it does really well in that footprint. I think one of the only gripes I would have about Santa Monica at all is it comes in this huge box, and it doesn't need to come in the same size box as, most games. It is small enough. It should be in a smaller size box, much like Cat Lady. So I don't know why they put it in a big box. Maybe they're planning on doing a lot of expansions down the line, and the big box will have room to fit everything. But the insert that is in there is also not much of an insert. It's just kind of like, two big cardboard pieces on the side and then a narrow valley in the middle, and that's where all your stuff goes, and then all this stuff is unused. So smaller box would have been better, but great game. One of the very best light games out there. I very much would recommend anyone who thinks that they might be interested in Santa Monica or Cat Lady or has played Cat Lady and likes it, get Santa Monica. It's so good. It's a really great little light game. Very, very fun to play. Kind of relaxing even, but very compelling through the design and the nice little wooden pieces in the game. So that wraps up that section. And this brings us to the end of the video. And as I said at the top, I will be out of town for a couple days this week, so my video production will stop for a few days, and then you'll start seeing those first impressions videos from me land starting next weekend, and it will be CloudAge, Curious Cargo, Merv, Kanban EV. You'll also get another Kickstarter update video from me at the end of next week, almost into the weekend, and then sometime around there you'll get my May Game of the Month video, which will feature at least 3 games that I played in May that are my favorite of the month and the best games and games that I want to recommend to you once again. So be looking for all those videos starting next week. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great Memorial Day weekend and a great shortened week to follow. Thank you very much for watching this, and listening to my thoughts on these games. I hope I was able to help you with some of your Kickstarter decisions. If it's your first time here, please consider liking and subscribing. If it's not your first time, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can also like it as well. And I will see you very soon next week with a whole bunch of new videos. And until then, take care, keep gaming, and have a great week gaming however you are able to game these days in this pandemic situation that is hopefully slowly starting to now, at least here in the United States, be remedied somewhat. So we're starting to get into being able to play, I think, at higher player counts with more people, and I'm really looking forward to that. I just want everyone to stay safe and have fun while they do it. Okay, take care. I will see you soon.